Michael J. Love is an interdisciplinary tap dance artist whose research intermixes Black queer feminist theory and aesthetics with rigorous practice to engage in thinking on the Black cultural past and Black futurity. His work has been supported and presented by Fusebox Festival, Arcos Dance, and the Cohen New Works Festival. He has also collaborated with transmedia artist Ariel Renee Jackson on video and performance projects, which have been featured in or programmed by New York Times Style Magazine's hashtag #TBlackArtBlackLife Instagram series, the New Museum in New York, and the George Washington Carver Museum in Austin. Love's performance credits include the Broadway Laboratory for Savion Glover and George C. Wolfe's Shuffle Along, performances along Bakari Wilder, and roles in work by Andrew Nemar's NYC-based Cats Paying Dues. Our conversation with Love is hosted by Austin Community College's Florinda Bryant.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Welcome to this next episode of Makers and Methods with ACC. I'm very excited today. I have here Michael Love. And before, I guess how I want to kick this one off, Michael, is tell the people what you want them to know about you in terms of an introduction. Like, what do you want the people to know about you today in this moment?
Yes, my name is Michael J. Love. I am originally from the DMV area. That's DC, Maryland, and Virginia, for those of you who don't know. And I've been in Austin since 2014, and I am an interdisciplinary rhythm tap dancer. And I like to say that I intermix Black queer feminist theory and aesthetics with like my rigorous practice in tap dance to engage in thinking on Black pasts and Black future. So, yeah.
Thank you. So the next thing that I want to ask you is tell me a little bit about your practice, about your work before Austin. We'll call BA. Before Austin, what was life like for you? What was your art like?
Yeah, before Austin, I was basically a gigging dancer. So I graduated from undergrad in 2010. So it's been like the full decade. A lot has gone on. And I moved straight away to New York right after, not even a month after graduation. And I was there for like about a year. And then I was like doing odd jobs. Like I moved back home with my mom to like drop my stuff off. And then I like was out like on tour and like doing different gigs around the country. So like I was like moving around a lot. I didn't really have like a home base, like besides like my parents' house. So yeah, pretty much a performer doing other people's choreography on stage is what I was doing before Austin.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. And so then talk about your experience with the work after Austin.
Yes. So I moved to Austin to take a contract as a principal with a company based here. And then after about a year and a half of that, I decided that it wasn't the right space for me. So I left, and I really started to make my own work. And then along the way, I also went to graduate school at UT, in the Department of Theater and Dance, and I got my MFA in Performances Public Practice. So I think like these last like almost 7 years, like 6-7 years, it's been really thinking about like practice and theory, like bringing those two things together. And developing my own work and and talking about the stuff that I want to talk about through the dance, right?
Cool. Okay. And so when we're thinking about practice and theory, and it's something that you're calling mixed tapping, am I saying am I pronouncing that how you want to the mixed tapping?
Yeah. So yeah, mixtaping, like making a mixtape like back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I just didn't know how I wanted to pronounce it right because I felt like I was like, oh, I get it, and it it reads the way I wanted to make sure that that's translated.
But that's right. Yeah, because tap's in there. So yeah.
Okay. So tap. Okay. So mixtaping, which I love because that speaks, I think it immediately, I'm like, okay, we got some hip hop roots, some jazz roots, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But I want to, if you don't mind, ask you one more quick question about that transition piece, because most of our, students, a lot of our students are going to be coming from ACC,
Hmm.
from Texas. I'm thinking really
Hmm.
Texas. I'm trying to translate what that
Hmm.
means, because it's like, oh, it's amazing. You
Hmm.
actually were contracting and touring and living the
Hmm.
dream, man.
Hmm.
And then, and reading your thesis, something that caught my eye was that it was that got interrupted by what happens when we are in unsafe spaces that are not held accountable.
Yep.
And so then our work kind of has this ongoing social justice piece that I don't know is necessarily an option. Um,
It's not. It's not. Yeah.
right. And I know that we hear of it. So we know the artists who came to that crossroad and then
Right.
decided to continue in this path and to keep going. But then I want to kind of amplify when we have artists that say, no, that's not okay. And they
Right.
still find ways to do their work. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I'm sure the stakes were high and a lot was at risk.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I was in a situation. I was like, like I said, I was on a contract, a season-long contract with a company that was presenting at a pretty like sizable venue in Austin. We were like a resident company at the Long Center, and it was a tap dance company. So yeah, and it was a company that like sort of prides itself on being like the only full-time tap dance company in North America, and
Mhm.
there's various truth to that. But like, in all intents and purposes, it is like one of the few like organizations that is like paying people for a season long contract. So like I was like basically like I moved here and I like, I had rent, I had a car, like I had all this stuff, and I was like, hey, like this is it. Like I finally figured out a way to like make money and like have a check every month. And like maybe it's not like the amount of money that I would like to get, but it's like a solid amount. I can pay my rent, I can get food, I can like, hang out, like be comfortable. And like I was also teaching to like supplement that. So like I was getting to a place where I was feeling like pretty like solid and like I can finally like build a little bit.
Mhm.
And then it just became super obvious that, tap dance is a black art form. So period. Period on that sentence.
Yes.
Um, and so there's a certain amount of like respect and sort of awareness and positionality that I expect people who are like engaging in that form around me to have. And when it becomes obvious that that's not the case, one, when it becomes obvious that that's not the case, and two, when it becomes obvious that like when that's not the case, that those who are not meeting those expectations are not willing to do the work to sort of say like, okay, you're right. Like I need to sort of like maybe read some things, maybe speak to some people, maybe just like sit down for a little bit and just like think about like what it means for me as a non-black person to be engaging in this. Then I think those are people that I can't like trust. Like I can't trust to be directed and like be sent on stage to like do the work of someone who like doesn't have the capability to do those things.
Mhm.
And so like there was like a series of events and there was a major event that occurred and took place, and I sort of had to like step back and say like I'm not comfortable with this.
Mhm.
I've been working too hard, I've been training for too long, like I know too much and like I'm in love with this form to like let it go. And so like I'm gonna figure out how to be in situations where like I feel good, like it feels good to do work. Like I'm doing work that feels good, like to my body, to my soul,
Mhm.
and like work that I'm proud of, because it's not worth it to me to do work that's not that I don't feel proud of, right?
Right.
And so like it became obvious that like I would have to sort of do work that like speaks to my experience and like the realities of my experience. And so like there's a certain sort of like power that comes with like speaking your truth. And so yeah, I would just leaned into that, and it's been like really rewarding. And so yeah, that's kind of that was a switch for me. It was sort of figuring out like how to make the form, like how to make it or like make it my own. I guess that's the phrase I want to use. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that freedom and self-liberation is just
Hmm.
something that really like comes to me, and he
Yeah.
keeps coming to me through reading your thesis and then always
Yeah.
hearing you talk about your work. You in your thesis talked about mixtaping as like performances research scholarship,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then a critical method of performance making, and that is so critical. Tell me like how, like, and I know that this something happened in life that kind of kicked you into this place, but
Yeah. Yeah.
how else has it evolved, and how can it become a useful strategy for other young artists?
Yeah. Well, I think going to school like gave me sort of like the fancy language to use, but I think these are like the things that I'm talking about, or like, pulling from other people to like talk about. in my thesis is really things that like, you know, Black folks have been doing since forever, right? So like we're talking about accessing like an embodied sort of knowledge. So like things that are stored in the body that are like arrive to the body through like, you know, your stories that you learn from family members, or you know, there's like moments sometimes when you just like feel something or like know something, and you might not necessarily understand like where that's coming from, but it's just like you just know because it's there. It's like
Yeah.
it's like from the ancestors are like letting you know that something is going on, and so you're feeling
Yes.
sensations in your body, and you're like, you know, some people might say, "Oh, I have a gut feeling," or "I feel it in my bones," or like "There's a voice in the back of my head." Like that's all that kind of like. So
Mhm.
really, all that language that I'm using in my thesis is figuring out how to use performance and really like practice. So, like even just going into the rehearsal room by myself and like turning on music that like sounds good and just like improvising for like a few hours just to like get a feeling out. That's
Mhm.
like research to me.
Yeah.
Like even just like talking to people about like, did you see that crazy news story? Like, how do you feel about that? And like just talking to people and talking through it, like that's research to me, right? And that's
Right.
not like necessarily research that's based in like I'm gonna open a book and like take notes, even though
Right.
that's like valuable.
Mhm.
But like I think that like the research that's done outside of like those formal academic spaces or like methods is also as valuable, right?
Mhm.
So that's really what I'm talking about there. Yeah.
Mhm. Cool. I'm so excited that this is being added to that arsenal of what's available for us as artists to be able to talk about our work and to like it validate it. It's validated to us, but then we need this other lens, this other way of talking about it
Yeah.
to let the people know it's a serious thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it is, you're right, it's the thing that, you know, the people been doing. And speaking
Yep.
of the people, them people, your people, I know you probably have listened to Sharon Bridgeforth, Who Your People
Mm-hmm,
Is. If you haven't
mm-hmm,
heard that podcast,
mm-hmm.
go check it out. But so I'm going to borrow from that question, and I just want to know, like, who's in your lineage? Who have you learned from? Who are your people?
Yeah. I mean, like honestly, like you, Dr. McWhorter, but like also people like one of my teachers, Bakari Wilder, was someone who I studied with when I was like younger, definitely a teen, and I like looked up to him a lot and I tried to emulate him a lot. I mean, I saw Savion Glover on Sesame Street when I was like 5 and didn't really understand what he was doing, but I was like excited about it. And so my mom
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh, okay, like let's sign you up for some classes. Let's see." And so I'm really
Yeah.
grateful that like I had parents who like always supported me, like my mom and my dad, and like grandparents and cousins and all of them were always like supportive. So like obviously all those my whole family's in that lineage as well. And then I mean, like every tap dancer, right? It's a art form that's like passed down orally. Like there's a very specific oral tradition. So like I would say that like I learned the form from like people like of the Savion Glover, Bakari Wilder, like Dermisha Sumbry Edwards, Jason Samuel Smith, Derek Grant, sort of like generation of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then they learned it from like the Diane Walkers of the world, and then like she learned it from like the Gregory Hines and like all those other people. So like and like all the way up through like the Copacetics, which is that group of like tap dancers who they formed that group like a week after Bilbo Jingles died. So like obviously like the connections keep happening all the way back to
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know the folks who were
Yeah.
on the plantation in the South, like figuring out how to be connected to like their lineage. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't call it a comeback.
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
been here for years.
it's been here. Yeah, here,
We've
literally
been
on this
here.
earth. Yeah.
Yeah. So talking, and then some of the people, yeah, dance often feels very much like music. That often feels very much to me like hip hop and jazz, which is the jazz aesthetic. Can you talk to me a little bit about how unearthed and the intersections with the theatrical jazz aesthetic, and talk to me a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I actually like reference that a lot in my work. I think like the jazz aesthetic is something that I like, you know, because I was ignorant, I didn't know about, but that was like a thing that was like articulated and that folks were like doing it. Until I got to Austin and I like found like learned about all these great artists like the Sharon Bridgeforths of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, like this is actually like such a brilliant way of like talking about the fact that like different black art forms are like all so related, right? Like we're like a lot of us are thinking about like layers on top of each other, right? So like things that and like meters and time and like rhythm and like um things having deeper meaning and sort of like representations and like that's not the word I'm looking for. The word I'm looking for is like symbols and symbolism,
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
representation as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, but certainly like, and I would like, hip hop and jazz and like house music are all in the
Mhm,
same sort of like lineage and path and like way of
mhm.
thinking, like coming from like soul, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, and I hip hop is something that I've referenced because I do a lot of like sampling.
Mhm.
So I like literally one thing I do is like in my practice is I use a looping pedal and a beat pad to sort of like sample and like loops like video or like audio samples of different things, like whether it be like music or like famous quotes or like whatever. And so I definitely like see myself as like a child of like,
Mhm.
all the greats who have done that before. Like, I was just talking to someone about how I'm like a really big Missy Elliott fan and like Missy and Timbaland. Like to me, like when I think about like Black futurity or like thinking about like Black futurism, like I think of like how Missy and Timbaland have always been like, we're in the future, like y'all need to catch up. And like as a child,
Yeah.
I've been like trying to catch up, and like that's like how I think about like Black people, like sort of like outliving where we are right now. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. Yes. The future is where it's at, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
Black. We all know this. So because I want to be mindful of time, because I feel like too,
yeah.
just I love you and I love your work. I
Likewise,
I
likewise.
I do have to say there's something, and I think that it's specific to tap. Like you did a performance at the Daughtery Art Center,
Hmm.
and I had such my reaction to just seeing it. Like I remember my favorite part about like getting like the new taps on my shoes is because
Hmm.
my dad, my chemical plant, like working big, huge man, like just very, big bear of a man would come in the garage, and it was like one of the few times I remember actually being able to dance with my dad. And he'd
Yeah,
like stick the little bottle caps up on his things, and it was, and I always sat with him like, how does he know this? How does he know? How do we know what's in our body? And I think that it's just like that. I was like, oh, that was me witnessing something that you talk about,
yeah,
the truth being in the body and how we
yeah,
release, and that this art form really is ours.
yeah.
So I love seeing you do this. What do you have? Well, before I ask you this last question, I want another one. What's the
Hmm.
question that you wish people asked you about your work?
I think as a tap dancer, I'm always interested in talking about like what it looks like, but also like what it sounds like. So
Mm.
I feel like I love questions about like rhythm and sound. Um, yeah.
Hmm. Is there a question that you're like, oh, I like this particular question about rhythm and sound because it lets me say that thing I always want to say? Is that?
See, I say that I don't know. I'm like I don't even know like what the perfect question would be, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I feel like I can hear that because I have the sound of a thing. It's
Hmm.
like this whole other world. It's almost like another character that's in the room with you, playing with you.
Yeah,
And so it is nice to think about sound really
yeah.
intentionally and what things sound like.
Hmm.
Um, you could watch Lori Carlos just when she was going, and
Hmm.
she would be in her head, and I knew she was listening
Yeah,
for these
yeah,
sounds. And
exactly.
yeah, it's beautiful to see it come out of your body. I was
Yeah,
like, how you do
yeah. And like also I do like black folks just like there's certain rhythms like
it?
that you can just play and people already like it's like everyone has a connection to like certain rhythms, right? So yeah.
How do we do this?
Yeah.
Oh, people, it's magic.
It's just
So what are you working on now? Like what's up next for you?
yeah, so right now I actually after searching for like 6, 7 months, I finally was able to secure sort of like rehearsal space for myself.
Mm,
And so I'm about to launch a sort of like online platform where I do like classes and like live performances online. So I'm figuring all that out. I'm like learning. There's like a lot of technology like catch up learning I'm having to do, but that's like fun for me. It's like a challenge. So
mhm.
stay tuned because I'll obviously like blast all the info like online. But yeah, I would love to have folks jump in for classes and performances.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I'm so interested. I'm like, how
Yeah.
we gonna mic your feet? Like, how does that
That's
work in
t-
performance?
I yeah I had so I there's like you can get like audio mixers. So this is like a whole like I had to sit online and like go through all these message boards and figure out like how to do this. And so like there's like mics, and you can run like sound and music into a mixer, and then it'll put it like basically into Zoom or like whatever live streaming platform you want to use, so it's like clear. Um, and I've used it once and it went pretty well. So I'm like, okay, like I think I'm gonna see like what the boundaries of this are, and like we'll see. So yeah,
Sweet.
maybe it won't work at all, but I think that's part of
But that's the exploration that we
Yeah,
have
exactly.
to do, and something that why that performance and that like why we got to do the work to
Exactly. It's
figure
the
out the work.
research. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we got to go
exactly.
research.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
gonna go
yeah, yeah.
research.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna write about it. So it's some
Yes.
scholarship
Yes,
involved.
exactly, exactly.
I'm so glad that you're in our community, that you're still here in Austin selfishly. I'm happy that you're here. We need, we need to be here. There are a lot of wonderful things happening in the city, and I'm glad that you're a part of it. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing more from you. And thank you all, and we'll join us next time for our next episode of Makers and Methods. Bye, y'all.
Peace, y'all. Bye.